In this lecture, we're going to do a practice project, and we're going to be building a fortune teller app. What we're going to do is have an application like this. If you run it, it's going to ask you your name. If I put in my name, let's say Daniel, it's going to tell me a fortune teller thing. It's going to tell me, oh dear Daniel, I see a lot of things, okay? And the app can ask me if I want to try again, and if I don't want to try again, I can hit no here, and I use N. But I want to continue, I want to show you how this works. So I can put in a Y, and it's going to keep giving me things. And if I want to add, I'm going to hit no. And when I hit no, the application is going to add. Let's try it again. We're going to clear, and I am going to run my rooster executable here. And it's going to ask me my name. I'm going to say Daniel Gakwaya. I'm going to put in my full name. It's going to support that. And it's going to keep telling me predictions, and now they don't see anything. I want them to try again. Now they see something good. And we can keep going, keep using the application like this. And when we feel like we are done with that, we can hit the no button or N, and we can end the application. So this application is going to use a lot of things we have learned either in this chapter or in previous chapters. For example, now you might have an idea about how you can do it to give the user control, allowing them to either continue using the application or end the application by hitting N. This is something we did with a calculator in a previous chapter, and we're going to be reusing this concept here. But notice that we are storing information here. We are asking the user to give us the name, and we're going to get the name and store that in our program so that we can print it with every message here. Okay, so we're going to see how we can use character arrays to store information like this. Another thing is that we are trying to generate these predictions randomly, and we're going to be using a random number generator like the one we built in the last lecture. So this is what we are up against in this lecture. Let's jump and look at the code we're going to be using. What we're going to do, we're going to put up a program like this, and here I'm going to try and explain it a little bit. Then we're going to head over to Visual Studio Code and actually do this. We're going to put in a bunch of variables here. This end variable, it is a Boolean. It's going to control when our program ends. And this must be familiar because it is the same structure we've used for our calculator app in the last chapter. We're going to ask the user, what's your name, dear? And the user is going to be required to type in the name. We're going to store the name in this character array called name. We want this to be constrained to 15 characters, and we want the flexibility of being able to change this length here. That's why we have it stored in a variable like this. But as I explained this, I noticed a typo that I've done. You can't pass an array size that is not a constant if you have to store it in a variable like this. So in code, this will need to be constant. Otherwise, we're going to get a compiler error. And this is a chance for me to really tell you about this. If you plan on using a variable to pass the size of your array like we are doing here, that variable that you pass must be constant. If it's not constant, you're going to get a compiler error because you can't really change the size of an array. Arrays are not built to support this. So it has to be something constant that is not going to change when your program starts running. Okay, so we're going to get this name, and we're going to store that in this name variable using a function from the input stream here. It is a version of this method that allows us to store data in a character array like this. And what we need to pass in here is the variable name, which is name here, and the length of the character array. And this function is going to do the rest and store the data in place. And the bonus of this is that we can even pass input with spaces. So I can pass in my full name like Daniel Gakwaya, or really you can put in your full name and it is going to work. Now that we have input data, we're going to enter this loop. It is going to do whatever it is we want to do. For now, we just want to look at the control that is going to allow the user to use this application all over again on the terminal. Once we are done doing whatever it is we do in this loop here, we're going to ask the user if they want to go on. If they say yes, they will be wanting this loop to keep running. So AND is going to be set to false. If they say no, we're going to set AND to true. If we set this to true, this will end this loop here on the next iteration, and we are going to fall at the end and execute whatever is after this loop here. Okay, this is how we're going to control how this program keeps running, and we are putting control in the hands of the user, and they can type Y to keep using the application or type N to stop using the application altogether. Okay, now that the overall flow is in place, we're going to see how we can store a few character arrays, and we're going to be storing the predictions from the fortune teller in character arrays like this. So prediction 0 is going to have something in. It's going to be initialized as a string literal. And because of these double quotes, C++ is going to know that it's going to have to turn this into a character array and add the proper null terminator. And this is going to be a string that we can print and get in full like this. We're not going to get weird errors we saw when we had character arrays with no null terminator at the end. And we keep repeating the same thing by putting in different messages here. Here we have 10 messages, but you can really put in however much you want. It is not going to make a big difference here. After we have these messages, we're going to see how we're going to choose a prediction randomly. And we already know how to generate a random number. So what we do here, we're going to switch over the random number that we generate. Here we're going to generate a random number between 0 and 10 because we have 10 predictions here. So that's going to give us room for printing these things out. And we're going to be switching on each case here. So if the case is 0, we're going to print prediction 0. If case is 1, we're going to print prediction 1. And we're going to keep going until we hit the end. And the default case is going to say, I don't see anything. And we will factor this in by generating numbers between 0 and 10. And if we don't match cases between 0 and 9, and a 10 has been generated, we're going to hit this case and print it out. This is just a piece of logic I put in place to make sure we also get to run the default case here. And after the switch block here, you see that we have the usual thing. We're going to ask the user, do you want to continue using the application? If they say yes, we're going to set AND to false, and we're going to keep looping around doing the same thing here. If they say no, we're going to set AND to true, and at the next iteration, the test we have inside here is going to fail, and we're going to fall at the end of our while loop here. So this is how this program is going to work. If you run it, it's going to ask you for your name. You're going to type that in, and it's going to say, oh dear, and it's going to give you a prediction. And it's going to ask you, do you want to try again? And if you say yes, it's going to give you another prediction until you hit N to end the program. This is how it's going to work. Okay, now that we have an idea about how it's going to work, let's head over to Visual Studio Code and actually do this. Okay, here we are in our working folder. We're going to grab the files from the template project as we always do. We're going to come up and put that in place. And we're going to open this up in Visual Studio Code pretty quick. We are going to remove everything we have in the main function and paste in our program here. And we're going to walk through it and explain these things to you. And you're going to see that it's really not that complicated now that you know about arrays and character arrays specifically. Okay, so you see here we have a squiggly line saying that we have something wrong. We don't have the proper libraries included. From the last lecture, you must remember that we must include ctime for ctime to work. If we wait, this problem should go away. And the first thing we have in the main function is this std_srun statement, which is going to make sure we have a proper seed for our random numbers. This is going to make it possible to get a different sequence of random numbers every time the application is run. And we're going to be using the random number we generate to randomize how we print these predictions here. That's why we are using random numbers here. After we have the seed set up properly, the next thing we're going to do is put in place our predictions. And there is nothing special about these guys. They are a bunch of character arrays, and we're going to initialize them with string literals. And when we do things in double quotes like this, the compiler is going to do two things. It's going to turn this entire thing into a character array, and it is going to end it with a null terminator. And this is going to make it easy to print it with stdc out. And we have seen how this is useful. We're going to do the same thing with all the other predictions down here. After this, we're going to set up the variable, which is a Boolean, which is going to control when our loop is going to end. We initialize this with false because we want the loop to start running. After that, we're going to set up a variable that is going to store the name from the user. And we tell the user to type the name. So after this, they're going to type the name. And we're going to grab the name with stdcin.getLine. This function here is going to make it easy to grab input even if it has spaces. So that's why we use it here. It's going to take two parameters. One is going to be the character array that is going to store the name. The second one is going to be the length we expect the name not to go over. So we expect our names to be less than 15 characters. After that, we're going to start our loop here. And the condition is going to be true for the loop to run because and is false. So if we negate and, we're going to get it true. So we're going to get in the body and start executing things inside the loop here. We're going to print a simple message, oh dear name. We're going to say the name of the user and we're going to say IC. And we're going to start selecting the prediction randomly. This is really what we are doing here. So we are going to set up a variable called random. It's going to be of size t type. And we are going to say std_rand modulus 11. And this is going to give us a number which is random between 0 and 10. That's what we're going to cast to size t and assign that to random num. So our case here is going to be taking things between 0 and 10. Let's say that here. So let's say 0 through 10. To make it super clear, that's what we're going to get from random num here, a number between 0 and 10. If we hit this switch statement, we're going to get a number between 0 and 10, and we're going to case inside and print out each prediction. So if we have a 0, we're going to print prediction 0. If we have a 1, we're going to print prediction 1. If we have a 2, we're going to do 2. And we're going to keep going until we hit prediction 9 with case 9. And remember that our random number is going to be between 0 and 10. So if we don't have a number between 0 and 9, because that's what we are testing for here, we're going to hit this default case and we're going to print this message here. Oh, I don't see anything. And when we hit the end of the switch statement, we're going to ask the user if they want to keep running the program. Basically, if they say yes, we're going to keep running. If they say no, we're going to end the loop and we're going to fall down here. This is really all this program is doing. The main reason I set up this example was to give you a chance to practice character arrays again and see how they can really be useful in storing text information like this. Until now, we didn't really have a convenient way we could store character or text information like this, but now we have a better way, and this is much easier. And another reason was that we could reuse the same things we did in the calculator and really allow the user to interact with our program. They can control whether or not the program moves on by typing Y or N here. And this is something that may come in handy if you are building terminal-based applications. Now that you understand how this application works, we are going to run it. Let's remove this thing. We don't need it. This const_eval thing, I forgot to remove it. Now we are going to bring up a terminal. And what we are going to do is build this with GCC, as we always do in this course. So the build is going to be good. So we are clean here. Let's clear and run Rooster. You're going to see, it's going to ask me my name. I'm going to say Daniel Gakwaya. And it's going to say, oh dear Daniel, I see a lot of empty beer bottles on your work table. What is that? We're going to keep running again. It's going to say, oh dear, I see you sitting in the dark typing lots of lines of code on your dirty computer. Is that so? Let's keep looking. I see you sitting. It's going to give me the same thing. Let's do again. I see you laughing your lungs out. It's going to keep giving me different messages every time I run this. Now, if I hit N to end the program, it's going to end. It's going to tell me that's all I have for you today. Best wishes. But we can clear and run it again. And it's going to ask me my name. Let's say Jon Snow. Why not? It's going to say, I see you yelling at your boss, oh no, and you get fired. And we have a lot of funny messages here. You can play with this and really get a feel of how this works. The main important thing is that we are able to really do interactive applications. We can get input from the user, we can tell them to do things, and we can really control how this program runs by using this loop here. And this is pretty cool. And you're going to be reusing this design a lot in your career as a C++ developer. This is really all we set out to do in this lecture. I hope you found it interesting. We are going to stop here in this lecture. The next one, we're going to learn about multi-dimensional arrays. Go ahead and finish up here and meet me there.